The Cowboys just made a move that has everyone talking, and honestly, it might signal the end for one of our recent draft picks, which is wild to say out loud. But before we dive into all of it, you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because Blue and Silver Nation is the only place covering every single Dallas Cowboys update the moment it breaks. And we are grinding to build this community, so help us out and smash subscribe, because we need you on this ride with us. Now let's get into the chaos, because Marist Liufau's entire future with this team is hanging by a thread, and I'm not sure anyone is paying enough attention to how serious this situation actually is. Back at the Combine, the Cowboys made this big announcement that they were moving Marist to outside linebacker, and at the time it sounded like a fresh start, like they found a role that fits his skill set. But here's what nobody is talking about: that move screams desperation to me. When you draft a guy to play inside linebacker, and then less than a year later, you're completely changing his position. That's not development, that's damage control. The front office stood up there and talked about his length, his ability to disrupt the ball, his strength at setting the edge and affecting the quarterback. But let me be real with you, that whole pitch felt like they were trying to convince themselves more than us. Then things got even murkier, because later on during the draft coverage, one of the scouts mentioned he could play inside or outside linebacker, like they still don't even know where he fits, and that's a massive red flag for a guy who needs to prove he belongs on this roster at all. Right now, Marist Liufau is not a lock to make this team, and I don't think enough people realize that. Look at the outside linebacker depth chart for a second. You've got Micah Parsons, obviously. You've got DeMarcus Lawrence. You've got Sam Williams, whose contract is basically guaranteed, which means he's not going anywhere. You've got Marshawn Lloyd. And then you still have guys like James Houston, Tyrus Wheat, and others fighting for spots. That's already a crowded room, and Marist is at the back of that line. On the inside linebacker side, it's not any better, because you've got Damone Clark, you've got Jabril Cox potentially coming back, you've added new pieces in the draft and picked up Curtis Robinson after the draft ended. The writing on the wall is pretty clear. Marist Liufau is fighting for his football life in Dallas, and unless he has an absolutely lights-out training camp in preseason, I'm not confident he survives final cuts. The crazy part is, this was a guy the Cowboys were genuinely excited about when they drafted him, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I think we might be watching that reality play out in real time. If he can't carve out a role on special teams and show he can contribute on defense, in some capacity, he's gone. And that's just the harsh truth of this business. Now, whether Marist makes it or not, the Cowboys know they still need help at linebacker, especially on the inside, and all signs point to them not being done adding talent to that room. Multiple reports from league insiders have hinted that Dallas is keeping their options open when it comes to bringing in another veteran linebacker, and honestly, I think they should. Because right now, I'm not sold on who the signal caller is going to be on defense. Damone Clark is athletic and he can run, but is he the guy you trust to be the green dot, calling out the defensive adjustments and getting everyone lined up every single snap? I'm not sure yet. The Cowboys added some young linebackers in the draft, and Curtis Robinson could be a special teams contributor, but none of those guys scream starting caliber communicator to me, at least not right now. So what are the options? One name that keeps popping up is Jordan Brooks, who would be an incredible fit in Dallas, because he can run, he can cover, he can tackle, and he has that cerebral aspect to his game where he processes things quickly and keeps the defense organized. But here's the problem: the price tag is reportedly pretty high, and I don't know if the Cowboys want to pay what it's going to cost to pry him away from wherever he ends up. Another name that's been floated around is Bobby Wagner, the future Hall of Famer, who still has some gas left in the tank. But let me pump the brakes on that excitement for a second, because Bobby Wagner, at this stage of his career, is basically a two-down linebacker. Yes, he can still communicate. Yes, he can still diagnose runs and fill gaps and be around the football, but his coverage skills have fallen off a cliff, and that matters. If you're bringing in a linebacker who you can't trust on third down, then what exactly are you solving? The whole point of adding a veteran is to have someone who can play all three downs and be that steady presence in the middle of your defense. Bobby Wagner might not be that guy anymore, and it's not an accident that the Commanders didn't bring him back, even though Dan Quinn knows him as well as anyone. I think if you're going to add a linebacker, it needs to be someone who can actually help you in coverage on passing downs, and not just be a run stuffer who you have to take off the field in obvious passing situations. The Cowboys have made it clear they want to build more depth at linebacker, and I believe them, but they also have a tendency to wait and see how things shake out in training camp before making another move. Don't be surprised if 2 weeks into camp, the front office looks at the linebacker room and realizes they still need another piece, and then they go out and make a move either through trade or signing a veteran who gets cut from another team. It's happened before, and it'll probably happen again, because that's just how this organization operates. They want to give their young guys every chance to prove themselves before admitting they need outside help. Let's shift gears and talk about another roster bubble guy who I think is in serious danger of getting cut, and that's Luke Schoonmaker. I know some of you are going to push back on this because he was a second-round pick just last year, but hear me out. The Cowboys added a ton of competition at tight end, and I'm not convinced Luke has done enough to separate himself from the pack. Last season heading into the year, the team publicly said they were really happy with the progress Luke made in the offseason, and they had high expectations for him, but then he got on the field, and it just didn't translate. 14 catches for 132 yards across an entire season is not what you want to see from a guy you spent a second-round pick on, especially when Jake Ferguson is already entrenched as the number 1 tight end, and you need that number 2 option to step up and be reliable. Brevin Spanford came on strong late in the season, and by the end of the year, he was basically splitting snaps evenly with Schoonmaker, and honestly, I thought Spanford looked better. He's bigger, he's a more physical blocker, and he showed more playmaking ability when the ball came his way. Then you add in the fact that Dallas drafted Michael Trigg, who has a ton of upside as a receiver, even though his blocking needs work. And you brought in guys like Princeton Fant and DJ Rogers, who both have intriguing skill sets, and suddenly the tight end room is crowded as hell. The question becomes, can the Cowboys afford to keep 4 tight ends on the roster? And if they do, is Luke Schoonmaker one of those 4? I'm starting to lean toward no, and here's why this feels like the classic situation where a team gives a recent draft pick one more year to prove it, and if he doesn't show significant improvement, they move on and don't look back. If Spanford has already locked up the tight end 2 spot, which I think he has, then Schoonmaker is competing with Trigg, Rogers, and Fant for that 3rd spot and maybe a 4th spot if they carry 4. Michael Trigg has the upside that coaches fall in love with even if he's raw and needs development. DJ Rogers is a mauler as a blocker, which this team loves in their tight end room. Princeton Fant has been on the roster and knows the system. Where does that leave Luke? On the outside looking in, unless he has a monster camp. And honestly, I just haven't seen enough from him to believe that's going to happen. Now, if he does ball out and earn his spot, that would be a great problem to have because it means the tight end room is deeper than we thought. But I'm not betting on it, and I think this could very well be his last year in Dallas no matter what happens. The juice might not be worth the squeeze anymore, and the Cowboys know they can't afford to hold on to guys. Just because of draft pedigree, they need production, and they need it now. All right, let's wrap this up by talking about George Pickens because even though he signed the franchise tag earlier this week, I know a lot of you are still wondering what happens next and whether the drama is actually over. Here's my read on the situation. I think George and his camp tried to generate trade interest and leverage a long-term deal, and it just didn't work out the way they hoped. Nobody wanted to pay both the trade compensation and the massive contract extension that George is looking for, so they ran out of options and he signed the tag. Now the big question is, does he show up for OTAs and mandatory minicamp? And here's where I'm going to give you my honest opinion. I would be absolutely shocked if he skips mandatory minicamp, because why would you sign the franchise tag and then turn around and start paying fines? That makes zero sense. Nobody opts into giving the team $50,000 or $100,000 just to prove a point when you could have made that point by not signing the tag in the first place. The fact that he's signed tells me he's planning to show up and play this season under the tag, and then next year, there's going to be a much firmer line drawn in the sand where he says, okay, I was the good soldier, I played on the tag, I did what you asked, now, either pay me, trade me, or let me walk. We've seen this agent do this before with other clients, getting them to play on the tag for a year and then pushing hard for a resolution the following offseason. Some of those guys got paid, some of them moved on, and some of them even fired the agent. But the pattern is pretty consistent. I think the initial leak that George was going to sign the tag was one last attempt to see if it would spark any late interest from other teams, and when nothing materialized, he just went ahead and made it official. One recent update from a national reporter basically said the same thing, that the trade market never developed the way his camp thought it would, and the most likely outcome all along was him playing this season in Dallas on the tag. Now, could there be one more annoying twist where his agent makes some last-ditch effort to drum up interest? Sure, it's possible, but I'm not counting on it. I think we're past the drama for this year, and honestly, that's the best-case scenario for everyone involved. Because this team needs to focus on football and not contract disputes. George Pickens is going to be a Cowboy in 2025. He's going to play on that franchise tag, and then next offseason, we'll do this whole dance again, but with much higher stakes, because that's when he can really force the issue. So where does this leave us as Cowboys fans heading into the summer? We've got roster bubble guys like Marist, Liufau, and Schoonmaker fighting for their lives. We've got a linebacker room that still might not be finished being built. And we've got George Pickens locked in for one more year whether he likes it or not. The draft is over, free agency has cooled down, and now it's all about development competition and seeing who steps up when the pads come on. I'm cautiously optimistic about this team because I think the talent is there, but there are still some major question marks, especially on defense, and especially at linebacker. If the Cowboys can find that green dot guy who can run the defense and make the calls in real time, this unit could take a serious step forward. But if they can't, it's going to be the same issues we've seen the past few years, where we get gashed in the middle of the field and give up big plays because guys aren't on the same page. On offense, I feel pretty good about where things are headed, especially if the tight end competition brings out the best in everyone, and we actually get some consistent production from that spot behind Jake Ferguson. The offensive line is solid, the skill positions are loaded, and as long as Dak stays healthy, this offense should be able to score with anybody. The question is, can the defense hold up its end of the bargain? And can the coaching staff finally put it all together when it matters most in January? That's what it all comes down to, and that's what we're going to be talking about all summer long, right here on Blue and Silver Nation. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed, because we're dropping Cowboys content every single day, and we're building something special here, so don't miss out. Drop a comment and tell me what your confidence level is in this team right now on a scale from 1 to 10, and tell me whether you think Marist makes the roster, whether Luke survives cuts, and whether the George drama is really over, because I want to hear what you think. Let's keep this conversation going, and let's get ready for what's going to be one hell of a season in Dallas. Blue and Silver Nation, let's ride.